Welcome back, everybody. Thursday, February 16th. I am John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report, here to talk to you about the latest news from Ukraine. Let's get TikTok rolling and see if my internet's behaving tonight. Yesterday, it was not, but we are hoping. I've even got a diagnostic running in the background just in case everything gets hinky again, but we shall see. Good connection on TikTok. Excellent. All right, guys. As always, I take a couple minutes just to make sure we get a critical mass of folks here first. So introduce yourselves if you would. I will sip a little tea, but hopefully not too much tea, because I learned the other night I had a little too much tea and I was flying by halfway through the show until somebody noticed it. And I read your comment and I went, oh, okay, a little too fast. Anyway, cheers, everybody. Yeah, like I said, we'll start in a minute once we get a few more people here. Thank you, Ms. But please do introduce yourselves and where you are from. Happy Thursday, Grayson. And as always, I've got TikTok over here on my iPad. I've got YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter over on my laptop. And that's why you'll see me kind of looking back and forth and back and forth. So there you go. Whew. Anyway, hello, Toronto. Thank you, Elle, for the carnival mask. I do like that mask. I always like the masks on as far as the Twitter gifts go. They're very cool. But are tanks going to be in country today or tomorrow? I have not seen anything new about tanks arriving anytime soon. So, cheers from Quebec, Canada. Hey, salut, Franck. Ça va? One of my friends from graduate school. All right, guys. Another half minute. Just going to wait for a few more people to arrive, and then we'll dive in. Like I said, I like to sort of just get a critical mass going, usually about a minute or two max, and then we start. Yeah, I'll start now. Okay, guys. So I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show I do Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. And the way the show works, for about the first half hour, sometimes longer. I've got a lot of news tonight, so it might go a little longer. I will talk to you guys about the news that I think matters today. In other words, not just any news, but the news that I think maybe tells us a little more of the narrative of how the war is going and where it's going. And then for the second half of the show, I'll take your guys' questions on TikTok. You can submit them. Now, let me look really quick here, because people told me the TikTok Q&A, thank you for the hydro slime there, Allie, that the TikTok Q&A that used to be in the TikTok Q&A was removed months ago, and people told me it may be back. Let me look here. Text poll, quick poll. I ain't seeing it. Enhance. Nope, those are features. I mean, this is so ridiculous. So TikTok is giving you guys the Q&A function, a number of you in TikTok again, but I still can't access it. So my guess is that the way it works is that, they're being a pain. Basically, maybe when you do Q&A at the bottom of your screen, it throws it into my main Q&A box. It's possible, but otherwise, I think it's safer just to go to the Q&A link in my profile, click it, and you guys can put your questions there. For YouTube and everybody, obviously, you can use the comments at the very bottom of your screen. The final thing is, I do appreciate your gifts. I do this full time. I do this for free. So quite literally, I am paying my bills with your guys' gifts. So please do keep the gifts coming, like the cool hat on TikTok from Debbie and your guys' super chat and super stickers on your end. I appreciate it. And one more thing. Hey, Google, set the temperature to 69. Sorry, it's getting a little hot in here. But I know whenever I do that, I screw up I screw up the thermostats around half the world when I do that. So sorry in advance, folks. All right, guys, let's get rolling. So a lot of news today. Actually. And like I said, if I go a little long, then I'll go a little long, meaning if the news section's longer, then I'll go longer for the question and answer. But the main focus we're going to talk about is the new Russian offensive. What does it look like it's turning into? Will it be successful? But let me give you two quick little stories first. The Israeli foreign minister arrived in Kiev today for an official visit. He reportedly did meet with Zelensky, which is interesting because Zelensky was saying he did not want to meet with the foreign minister. I believe the foreign minister's name is Eli Cohen, unless the Israelis were promising something really good. Now, interesting, because the Israelis obviously have been holding back on a lot of support for Ukraine, unfortunately, because they have. Thank you for the gift there. Who was that on music for? They've been holding back because the Israelis have got this whole complicated relationship with the Russians, and the Israelis go and they bomb Iranian militants in Syria, but because Russia controls Syria, if the Israelis piss off the Russians, then the Russians may not let Israel bomb in Syria. It's this whole complicated thing. And that's why the Israelis claim, thank you, Jesse, for the swing. That's why the Israelis claim they're not being as helpful as they could be. And I mean, I think saying they're not being as helpful as they could be is actually being too generous. They're not being helpful to Ukraine at all. In any case, Zelensky said he wasn't going to meet with them unless they offered something good. In the end, he did meet with the Israeli foreign minister. Probably not a bad idea, just because those personal relationships, as I always tell you guys, personal relationships in politics do matter a lot. So thank you, Sederman. So it's not a bad thing that they're establishing that relationship. And frankly, in Israel, Netanyahu is the new prime minister. Prime ministers change. Netanyahu could be out and the new prime minister could be the foreign minister next time. And all of a sudden, Zelensky has a personal relationship with the new prime minister of Israel. You see, this is part of the reason it's so important in politics to get to know sort of the larger administration. In any case, the Russians reacted as the Russians would by accusing Israel of visiting a Nazi state by visiting, I mean, just insane. Russian state television. Israel has visited a Nazi state and a Nazi leader, Zelensky. This is the quote from Russia. Even though he's Jewish, he's really a Nazi. And you're just going, oh my God. Whatever. I mean, they're doing this for their own mass audience. I do think what is interesting with this is that the Russians don't think like, I mean, in some ways they do think like us. I think anybody who says, oh, the Russians would use their nukes because they're not like us, that's BS. The Russians are like us in the sense of, every animal at its core is interested in preserving its own life, whether it's man, whether it's gorilla, or whether it's, a cockroach running down the street and you're chasing it. They're interested in preserving their own lives. So I don't think the Russians are going to do anything stupid with nukes that would get them killed. But there is something weird with the mentality, such as, what would make you think of accusing the Israeli foreign minister of visiting a Nazi state and then say that the Jewish leader of Ukraine, who's Zelensky, is really a Jewish Nazi? It's so, my point here is it's so absurd. It's so absurd and laughable that you kind of sit there and go, what were you even thinking that this was going to accomplish? Thank you, Music 4. Anyway, Institute for the Study of War, which is a very good defense think tank here in Washington, D.C., that I like to cite a lot because they're very good. Thank you, Aggie, for the hat. Says Putin is unlikely to announce major new Russian mobilization initiatives, meaning draft, in his Federal Assembly address on February 21st. Now, this was a question that somebody had raised yesterday, I believe, was whether we thought Putin was going to announce anything big in this big speech he was giving on February 21st. Remember that February 24th is the anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So clearly, Putin is doing this speech to mark the anniversary of the invasion. Thank you, Erica, for that. And ISW added they did not think that Putin was going to have any news on further escalation, major new Russian mobilization initiatives, and by mobilization, they mean drafting people for the war, or any other significant policy. So the thinking is, at least from their intelligence, is that Putin's not going to be doing anything. There's not going to be anything substantive coming out of his speech, which is interesting. Please do follow and subscribe. I always forget to mention that on TikTok especially, but also YouTube and the other services. Follow me. It helps you, I think, be notified when I go live, when I've scheduled the lives, and also on TikTok, of course. I do updates throughout the day. Didn't do any today, but I'll be doing some as soon as the show is over. Now, first big chunk we're going to talk about. As I said, today, a lot of the show is going to be devoted to talking about the big Russian counteroffensive and what it's going to be and whether it's going to be effective. Thank you, Erica, for that. The counteroffensive basically is there has been a lot of talk that the Russians are going to fight back hard this spring against Ukraine. That we know that the Russians, thank you, Violette, we know that the Russians have been assembling a lot of, Ukraine has about 20% in the military, they were trying to get 300,000 men. They at least got 200,000 men in the September, October mobilization. They didn't train them well. They didn't give them good weapons, but they're still bodies, and bodies help, right? Even if they're not really well trained. Thank you, Nurse Boyer, for that. So the big concern has been, what is Russia really planning for this big assault? When is it going to be? Is it going to be in a couple of days, which Ukraine was worrying about? Is it going to be in a couple of months, which NATO's been saying? And will it be effective? Let's start talking. There was an interesting article today in Sky News where they were talking to their military analyst, Sean Bell, about the Russian offensive. He was giving some interesting, I think, thoughts on substantively what it might be. And then after that, I'm going to summarize some other sources. Thank you, by my rules and music for some other sources that were talking about whether they think the offensive will actually be effective. Spoiler alert, they don't. Some of the other folks really do not think Putin's going to be able to do very well with this spring offensive, which is great news. But listen to this. So this is from Sky News military analyst Sean Bell. They say, our military analyst Sean Bell says there is no doubt that Putin will be trying to throw everything he's got at the attack against Ukraine, and that Russia is likely to make gains on the battlefield due to the sheer scale of its army. Bell's comments that due to Moscow's World War I style tactics, it has suffered a shocking 40% reduction in its combat effectiveness. Now, I think part of what they're saying in terms of World War I tactics is Russia has been doing this sort of trench warfare thing, for starters, where they're digging trenches and, the soldiers are there. I mean, it's a very hands-on fighting, and Russia has been just throwing its troops. They've been, especially the ex-convicts. Well, I guess they're not really ex-convicts yet. The Russian Wagner mercenary group and now the Russian Ministry of Defense have been going to Russian prisons and taking prisoners out and saying, if you promise to fight for us for 6 months, we will expunge your prison record. But they're taking people who have been sentenced to over 10 years in prison. In other words, people who have an incentive, right? If you're there for 6 months, a 1-year sentence, you're going to go, you think I'm going to go get killed in Ukraine for you for a 1-year sentence? 10 years plus, which means it's the most violent prisoners they're taking. Well, they've been throwing these guys, literally running across the field at the Ukrainians with no protection. They've been just getting mowed down. I mean, horrific stories of these Russians getting just killed, these soldiers and bodies piling. I mean, it's really, really nasty stuff. So that's what he's talking about with the World War I tactics that, hang on a second, just a little here. They're trying to throw everything they've got, World War I tactics to make gain on the battlefield. Bell's comments, thank you for that, Gizmo. Bell's comments that due to Moscow's World War I style tactics, it has suffered a shocking 40% reduction in its combat effectiveness. In the Donetsk town of Volodar, which I've talked to you guys a lot in the last few days, this is a town in Ukraine's east. It is around right here, just about west and maybe a little south of Donetsk. Thank you for the hat there, Al. And it is right along the front between the Ukrainian troops and the Russian troops. This is all Ukraine. The front, meaning where the Russian troops are versus the Ukrainian troops, more or less, I mean, I'm being a little vague here, but more or less runs down kind of like this over here, and then boom. Everything south of here is Russian, east of here is Russian, all the rest is Ukrainian. So Volodar is the place where there was massive fighting in the last week, and the Russians got utterly demolished. Even the Russian commentators themselves, the military experts, admit that the Russians got destroyed. I mean, it was very good news. Very good news for Ukraine. One battle where the Russians lost like 1,000 troops and tons of equipment. So it was very good. In any case, he says, in the Donetsk town of Volodar, Russian elite naval forces were badly mauled and suffered huge casualty rates, forcing them to flee in defeat. Russia has also lost much of its weaponry, with 2/3 of its battle tanks either destroyed or not available. As for a Ukrainian counterattack, he suspects this will happen later in the spring, once Ukraine has been sent more Western weapons. So in other words, Ukraine's trying to hold off and not do its big attack until it gets more of the tanks, if possible, but certainly the personnel carriers, the fighting vehicles, other things that we've promised. Whatever happens, the next few weeks are almost certainly going to prove decisive. Now, that's interesting to me because what comes next is CNN reporting on talking to a number of U.S., British, and Ukrainian officials who give I would say a much rosier picture for Ukraine and a much more dour picture for Russia. Listen to this. CNN, As Russia begins a new offensive in eastern Ukraine, the U.S. and its allies are skeptical. Actually, I'll tell you again, just in case, because I know we get new people coming in here all the time because it works like radio. You kind of drop in the middle of a live. We are talking about the Russian spring offensive. This concept that the Russians are planning some massive new attack anytime soon now, and the anytime soon now, and the sorry, I'm reading people's comments, and I shouldn't be reading comments. Sorry, but I'm reading people talking about echoes, which is throwing me off. Sorry about that. Beep, 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 beep. Oh yeah. So what I was talking about is the Russian planned offensive, and the issue here is will the Russians be able to accomplish anything? Will they be able? They're gathering all their troops, all their weapons they've got. Will they be able to make a difference or not? CNN. As Russia begins a new offensive in eastern Ukraine, the U.S. and its allies are skeptical Moscow has amassed the manpower and resources to make significant gains, according to U.S., UK, and Ukrainian officials. It's likely, this is a great quote from a senior U.S. military official, it's likely more aspirational than realistic. Aspirational than realistic means you aspire to something, but it's not real. So, and of course, dog, okay, dog, do your thing. Meaning the Russians think they're launching a new big offensive, but they're really not, that it's not going to amount to much. That's a heck of a lot different than what we saw from the British military expert on Sky News. Now, again, people are giving you the expertise, or I should say the analysis based on their expertise. So it's not really bad that we're getting different points of view because people are trying to prognosticate the future. And they can only tell you based on what they know, but nobody can predict the future, so to speak. In any case, let me go on here. Russia has been increasing the number of forces situated on its border with Ukraine and inside Russian-held territory in Ukraine. Some of the forces drawn from a partial mobilization ordered in September last year, right? That was the big mobilization in September when they basically dragged anybody they could, up 200,000, maybe 300,000 troops, and 1 million Russian men fled to the border. It's that mobilization. Some of the mobilization, despite the increased numbers, here we go. Despite the increased numbers of Russian troops, Western allies have not seen evidence of sufficient changes to those forces' ability to carry out combined armed operations needed to take and hold new territory. What that means is the Russians have a lot of new men, but they do a really bad job making war. Thank you, Roller Cat, for that. And specifically, it talks about combined arms operations, which I think some of the military folks out there watching could give you a better definition than me. But in essence, a combined arm operation is when you fight a war, you don't just say, send in the tanks. We've got tanks. Let's have a tank war. You literally sit there and you say, okay, we've got tanks. We've got men on the ground artillery that run on the ground. We've got, I'm not men on the ground artillery. We've got tanks. We've got big guns that shoot. Can scan, but can also drop weapons, right? We've got planes, at least some of the planes that can do some work. It's looking at, and tanks as well, looking at all of your weapons and all of your men and all of your stuff and figuring out in a combined way, what should your attack be? You don't just say, well, let's have a tank war tomorrow and just send in our tanks, right? You probably would use your artillery first and use the artillery to blow up everything you could. First, if you had airplanes available, kind of iffy with the Russians right now, you'd want to maybe send the airplanes in first and have them blow up the ground first. The idea is use the weapons that you can stand off a bit and not get yourself killed. And then once you've hurt a lot of the Russians on the ground, then you move in the tanks, then you move in the troops, right? Because now you've softened things up, right? You've made the Russians less powerful. Anyway, that's combined arms. What they are saying, these experts, is that the Russians are terrible at this. They have not done a good job, okay? And what is happening now is that they've got a lot of more troops, which is great, but these troops are just as bad as the earlier troops the Russians had, who don't know how to do this combined fighting and don't know how to do their job well. So a lot of the Western experts are saying, why is this going to be any different? You've got more men who are going to die again. Now, again, Volodar, this is why I'm not going to do a long thing on Volodar tonight, but I talked to you guys. I did sort of a long segment last night on it and the night before on Volodar, which is this town in eastern Ukraine that the Russians attacked and did just a terrible job and lost, thousands of men, lost a ton of equipment. I mean, a ton of equipment blown up, meaning tanks and things, but also at least 30 armored vehicles in good shape were left behind because the Russians so freaked out the troops, they ran. I mean, they literally ran in fear from the Ukrainians and left 30 vehicles behind that the Ukrainians were like, this is great. I mean, they're vehicles that work, right? That does not bode well for the Russian, this bigger offensive that's coming. Now, again, let's not assume that the Ukrainians is going to be a cakewalk, but that, for me, that goes hand in hand with what these experts are telling CNN about. It looks like the Russians have not learned their lessons. So hopefully these new Russian troops are going to be just as bad at making war as the old Russian troops. Let me tell you here. It is unlikely Russian forces will be particularly better organized, and so unlikely they'll be particularly more successful, though they do seem willing to send more troops into the meat grinder, a senior British official told CNN. So basically saying, more willing to get their troops killed by just sending them in anyway, but it doesn't look like they're any more effectively attacking the Ukrainians, but they may get more of their troops killed because they seem to like that. The U.S. military has assessed, I'm reading a CNN story right now. The U.S. military has assessed it would take as long as until May for the Russian military to regenerate. This is interesting. The U.S. military has assessed it would take as long as until May for the Russian military to regenerate enough power for a sustained offensive, but Russian leaders wanted action sooner. The U.S. now sees it as likely that Russian forces are moving before they are ready due to political pressure from the Kremlin, a senior U.S. military official told CNN. Again, think of what we've been learning in the last month or two about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, okay? We kept hearing about concerns of a big Russian offensive, maybe as early as the end of March, maybe mid-April, right? Then all of a sudden, the Ukrainians about a week or 10 days ago said, oh my God, we've got intelligence that the Russians are going to launch a counteroffensive on February 18th, like 2 days from now. Thank you, Montserrat, for that. And we've got to be ready now. It's coming now. And a lot of us were going, wait, I'm confused. I thought this wasn't coming for 2 months. Now it's coming this week. Well, what we were wondering is, did Putin put pressure on his own men and say, God, I don't care. You're going in there now. I don't care if you don't think you're ready, right? Well, it looks like, at least according to what the U.S. military is saying, I don't want to say feared because it's a good thing. What we feared, if you're Russian, is that Putin got involved and said, I need a win now. I'm not going to wait until May when we're ready. I want you to invade now. And the generals, because it's the Russian military and, you'll get shot if you disagree, said, okay, so they're going to be attacking, and it looks like they already are attacking. What's going on in the East the last few days looks like it's the beginning of the Russian offensive. And again, at least according to these senior military officials that CNN talked to, American in this case, the Russians hopefully screwed themselves with this because they're not ready to be fighting back, and they're fighting back. Finally here, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said Tuesday in Brussels that the U.S. is not seeing Russia massing its aircraft ahead of an aerial operation against Ukraine. So that's a good thing, too. That final little point, we were worried that Russia, there are signs that Russia has been massing a lot of planes near the border, or at least reports of this with Russia and Ukraine. And the concern was Russia planning some kind of a new air war against Ukraine? I was going to, the next topic is about that. So I'm not going to tell you why we shouldn't be worried yet, but that's what's coming next. Now, let me tell you really quick, because I wanted to do like a long, we went actually half an hour without a break here. Normally I do breaks. Thank you, Phoenix, for the gift there. I wanted to tell you really quick, in addition to gifts on TikTok and gifts on, super chat, super stickers on YouTube, one of the ways you guys can help me, because I do this for free. I've been doing it full time since the war broke out last February. And full time. So quite literally, you are paying my bills, but I think it's important and I want to do this. So you help me keep going with your gifts. So I appreciate it. One of the things I do is I've got a Discord community. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. And Matt, I've got a Discord community, which is basically a chat community. It's hard to explain what it is without experiencing it. It's over at discord.aravosis.com, my last name. You guys on TikTok can find it. Just go to the links in my profile, the Linktree link in my TikTok profile. It'll take you to all my links, including the Discord. For you guys, go to aravosis.com. But one of the neat things we do on the Discord to raise money for my work, but also for the Ukrainians is, we auction off cool things we got from Ukraine. We've had really cool Ukrainian commemorative stamps, like some stamps honoring the Russian warship "Go F Yourself." Not really using three fingers, if you know what I mean. Really cool stuff from Ukraine. Well, I've got more stuff coming, including the sweatshirts that Zelensky. You notice when winter came, Zelensky started wearing sweatshirts, and he wears these like sweatshirts, blue or green or black with the Ukrainian trident. We found the manufacturer, but the manufacturer, his stuff from the same companies. Thank you, Alan. We found the manufacturer. I've got those sweatshirts. They're already being shipped. They may get here the next week, I hope. So we'll be auctioning those. My other, where's the other? I was going to show you really quick. Oh yeah, I actually forgot I had these. I had gotten these a few months ago from a Ukrainian woman in Ukraine. She made these herself and sent me a bunch of Ukrainian flags. Now, I mean, it's a huge flag. It's a huge flag. Look at this thing. I mean, here you get a sense of how big it is, right? It is. I've been telling folks, I'm auctioning it off on the Discord. It is. I think it's an indoor flag. It doesn't. It's it's acrylic or whatever, but it doesn't feel to me like an outdoor flag. It's indoor. It's got a little thing for a pole. Anyway, you can go check it out in the Discord. It's very cool. I like it because the colors are beautiful. The Ukrainian flag. The colors are beautiful. And I like that it was made from this old lady in Ukraine who made it by hand and then sent me a bunch of them. So you can check it out over there. People are bidding on that. And the final thing, I've got 2 more boxes of these left after. Wait a minute. Oh, this is one of my 2 boxes left. I keep forgetting. These are totally cool. These are a Russian fighter jet that was shot down over Ukraine and made from titanium. I mean, it's funny because there's no weight to these things. You can't bend it. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. No weight though. Anyway, I've got several boxes of these. We had to pay $200 each for the box. Basically, we gave a donation to a charity, and this was the gift from the charity. But we've been auctioning these off. 2 people have already gotten them. They've been very happy. It's got a little, well, it's cute. The Ukrainians have a little thing, say Orc Busters is the name of the group, because they call the Russian soldiers orcs, like from Lord of the Rings. And it's a Lord of the Rings illusion, but it comes with the pieces of the jet, and then a little pamphlet that explains what the jet is, where it crashed. And actually, I did a bunch of research and now have a ton of cool stuff. I created a fact sheet for whoever wins these. We've got a video of the pilot. We know who the pilot is. We know when the plane crashed. We know where it crashed. The pilot was caught. We've got video of the pilot being caught and being questioned in the forest where he was caught. We've got video of the plane burning. We've got a criminal record filed against him for war crimes. I mean, tons of cool stuff about this plane, which is really neat. Just really neat. It's aluminum alloy mixed with titanium. Took a little bit of research to find that too. It's titanium along with a high strength aluminum alloy is what they said. Anyway, bottom line is we've got really cool stuff at the Discord. It's a great community, but also the proceeds, or the profits, I should say, from the auction, 50% go to my work because I literally do this for free. 50% we channel back into Ukraine. We've bought Starlink internet. We've bought sundries and supplies for Ukrainians with disabilities. We recently bought Christmas gifts for Ukrainian kids at Christmas. That was really neat. I put up a video on that on my TikTok. That was really adorable, these kids. And actually very sad at the same time, because you'd think with Americans. No. Yeah, well, Lumez, I'm just telling you what the description of the plane was on the defense websites. These poor kids, they've got these gifts in a room with all the Christmas decorations like we have, and these kids just look shell-shocked. I mean, a lot of them are like this. And you've got to remember they're kids who lost their parents. I mean, these are orphans, and they lost their parents in the last several months. right? So it's not like Christmas is, yay, I've got gifts, when 3 months ago mom and dad disappeared. Very sad, very sad. But in any case, so we're trying to do a lot of work, just channeling the money we can from resources from you guys back to Ukraine. We have now raised over $80,000 of humanitarian aid, a little bit of military, like I said, for drones and for batteries for the military, things like that, to help Ukrainians. 100% of it went to Ukraine, actually. Of the 80,000 we raised, I didn't touch a dime. I'm splitting the money on the auctions and stuff. Anyway, all right, back to the news. So air power. We were getting to Russian air power and whether that was going to make a difference in this new offensive that the Russians are planning that looks like it already started. Let me read this to you. Oh, this is interesting. Okay. This is from the British Ministry of Defense. The British Ministry of Defense has a really good Twitter account where every day they basically do a summary, very nice and short, of some topic dealing with the war. And today's summary, make sure my speaker isn't a little bit loud, a little hot. Today's summary is about air power and whether the Russian air power will make a difference because the Russians are having so many problems with ground power, right? With the men on the ground. As we just said, they haven't learned how to use them effectively, even though they've got more of them. A lot of the experts think it won't matter. So listen to this from UK Ministry of Defense. Russian sortie rates, now sorties are basically flights. Russian sortie rates have increased over the last week, following several weeks of quieter activity. Air activity is now roughly in line with the average daily rate seen since the summer of 2022. Okay, so that means we've got more Russian planes flying. That's of concern. Overall, Russian air power continues to significantly underperform in the war, constrained by a continued high threat from Ukrainian air defenses and dispersed basing due to the threat of strikes against Russian airfields. What they mean there is because they're worried about the Ukrainians striking them, they've had to move, because we've given them good weapons and the Ukrainians themselves still have a lot of planes. The Russians have had to move their planes to lots of different airfields. Mind you, the drones, the Ukrainian drone strikes have caused a lot of this, okay? The Russians have had to move their planes to a lot of different airfields, so it's making it harder for them to coordinate their air attacks. That's good. Next, Russian combat jets operate almost exclusively over Russian-held territory, preventing them from carrying out their key strike role effectively. This is an important point because it's something you will see come up again and again and again. Look at my neighbor's messaging me because her dog wants to play with Sasha. I need to let her know we've got our show. We've got our show until 7:15. I don't think she knows I do my show every night. The Russian planes had been pretty much stuck over Russian territory. Oops, looking for my shoe as I talk to you, or Russian-held territory. So meaning, if you're looking at the map and you're looking at Russia itself is all of this. Okay, this is Russia. If you're looking at what Russia's holding this in Ukraine. And rather than having the ability to basically send their planes into not free Ukraine and bomb Ukrainian supplies, the Russian troops, the Russian planes have been stuck protecting their own territory because the Ukrainians have really good air defenses. So meaning the Russians start to fly over Ukrainian territory and they get shot down. Well, that kind of limits what you can do because it means, okay, if the Ukrainians come into your territory, meaning occupied Ukraine, then the Russians might be able to use their planes. But the Russians, when they're attacking Ukrainian territory, they can't send their planes in first to soften up the land because the Ukrainians are shooting them down. So what they're saying here is it limits the ability of the Russians to use their planes to do much. A little bit more here. Across Russia, the VKS, which I believe is the Russian Air Force, likely maintains a largely intact fleet of approximately 1,500 crewed military aircraft, CREWED. So 1,500 military aircraft, despite losing over 130 since the start of the invasion. However, it is unlikely that the Russian Air Force is currently preparing for a dramatically expanded air campaign, as under the current battlefield circumstances, it would likely suffer unsustainable aircraft losses. So the point there is Yes, Russia's got a lot of planes. Yes, Russia might be moving a lot of planes closer to Ukraine. But just like with the ground troops we talked about earlier, right? The whole show tonight, I've been trying to focus on this new offensive that we're talking about. Russia's big, the empire strikes back, literally, right? The empire has decided they're going to fight back against Ukraine. And the first problem is, yeah, Russia's got a lot of troops, but the troops aren't well trained, and Russia has not fixed the problems it's had previously with its troops. That the logistics sucks. The troops don't know how to work well with other troops, so they can combine, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines in the U.S. case, right? They don't know how to work together. Now what we're seeing is even the planes have the same problem, that the Russian fighters haven't learned. They not only have they not learned, the battlefield circumstances have made it so that the Russian fighters can't be used, and they're going to get destroyed if they do get used. So the planes aren't going to help either. This is great. I mean, this is really great news for Ukraine. Again, I don't think anybody should assume that it's going to be easy for Ukraine, or, oh, that means Ukraine wins the war, or, oh, this Russian offensive won't cause that much damage to Ukraine. What it does mean, though, is we should temper some of our fear with some optimism that Russia's got a lot of things going against it with this spring offensive, which is good. But Ukraine is also still waiting for a lot of weapons from us, right? NATO didn't turn around on the tank issue. Thank you, Annie, for that. Guys, please do keep the gifts coming. NATO didn't turn around on the tank issue until like 3 weeks ago, right? And now we're dealing with America. Well, American tanks might get there in 6 months to a year. Thank you, Megwood and music. The British tanks, I think they're coming soon. The German tanks, and it's not just Germany. I mean, Germany has actually been, ironically, when it comes to the German tanks, the Leopard 2, it looks like Germany's been the best so far of the countries. Everybody else sending German tanks. Thank you, Flower Lady. I love that one. The other countries have now not been stepping up nearly as much now that Germany has said, okay, you know what? There are tanks. We sold them to you. Feel free to give them away to Ukraine or sell them to Ukraine. Thank you, Ali. The other European countries are now going, a lot of them are going, well, I know we said we would. Maybe we don't want to. So this would have been better had NATO reached agreement on the tanks 6 months ago, because we would have had ample time to iron out these differences and to actually get the tanks here. Sadly, we're not. Patreon. I have got a Patreon account as well. Just a couple more stories here. That's not a couple more. I've got a lot of more stories. I'm going to go through and pick the best ones. I've got a Patreon account as well. Patreon.com/Aravosis. You guys can check it out on TikTok on the link in my profile. The Linktree link will take you there. You guys, Aravosis.com. Basically, it's a way of supporting creators with a set amount of money a month. $5, $10, $25. And it comes in every month, and it's a way to have basically a stable income, because I'm doing this free, doing it full time, and it helps me out. You can check it out over at patreon.com/Aravosis. And also, depending how much you give, there's also benefits over at my Discord. You get access to the VIP Discord, the VIP auction. For example, right now, the Russian fighter jet parts from the plane that were shot down, we are auctioning them only in the VIP Discord, so you get access to that. All right. I'm going to go through this quickly. Per Sky News, Zelensky has dismissed suggestions Ukraine would agree to Russia retaining control over any of his country's territory as part of a peace deal. A new European Union poll is actually very good. There was an American poll that wasn't so good, but a European Union poll shows 61% of European citizens believe the European Union citizens believe the war will end in Ukraine's favor, but many think it is an attack on all of them. This is important. In other words, they don't look at it as, oh, that's Ukraine, that's not us. The EU-wide survey shows 68% of respondents view the invasion as an assault on Europe at large. That's huge. 68% is a really good number. German residents are less likely to think Ukraine will be successful. 55% of respondents say they think Ukraine will prevail. That's still pretty good. The majority of EU citizens, European Union citizens, who responded to the survey say they believe, thank you, Carmel, say they believe that Ukraine is defending values shared by all European countries. Again, these are really good survey results that basically put Ukraine, that the Europeans see Ukraine as sort of part of their universe, right? They see same values. The attack on Ukraine is an attack on all of us. And also the idea, I guess, what we're kind of getting here is that the threat Russia is posing by attacking Ukraine is clearly eventually a threat against all of us. That's great, because it's something that I worry. I don't know that and I've said this yesterday as well, I don't know that we've done as good of a job explaining to the American people that we're not just doing this to be nice guys. We those of us who support the war, especially the Biden administration, but those of us who support the war are very worried about American national security and what happens next if the Russians win this, that we're going back to the Cold War, we're going back to the Soviet days, which were very dangerous. Moldovan lawmakers have voted in favor of a new government led by a pro-Western economist. Thank you for the heart there, Dak. Max Sidon at Financial Times says, 2 days after the U.S. published a report claiming Russia has abducted at least 6,000 Ukrainian children, Russia's Children's Rights Commissioner, Maria Belova, tells Putin she adopted a 15-year-old from Mariupol herself. All thanks to you, Vladimir Vladimirovich. These guys are, big report comes out that the Russians kidnapped 6,000 Ukrainian kids. Many of them, some of them are orphans. Many of them still have parents. They took them, brought them to Russia, and they're basically auctioning them off. They're letting Russians just adopt these kids. These are Ukrainian kids with family and parents back in Ukraine, a lot of them. And they just took them out of the country. Mind you, even if they didn't have family, it's a war crime. This is rather obvious. You're invading a country. You blow up a village. You kill somebody's parents. You don't just take the kids like some puppy and say, well, I want that dog. I'm taking it back home. You basically treat it like a prisoner swap. You treat them better than prisoners because they're kids. But the point is, you treat it like a prisoner swap. You say, okay, these are Ukrainian children. We're going to figure out a swap with the Ukrainian government to return them to the Ukrainians. That's what you're supposed to do, or it's a war crime. The Russians are not doing it. It's disgusting. And it worries me because I worry, how do we end this war? How do you end a war with people who act this way, right? With people who literally, thank you, Carmel, people who literally think children children are animals to be stolen. Remember the Russians, they stole that poor, raccoon from the Ukrainians. Oh yeah, it's a story from several months ago. The Russians went to a zoo and stole a raccoon from a Ukrainian zoo and brought it back to Russia and then put it on TV as the raccoon they liberated. Ha ha ha. They're doing this to kids too. How do you reach a peace deal? Are we supposed to just ignore all these war crimes from the Russians and say, well, okay, I guess if you'll stop fighting, we're going to ignore the fact that you committed one of the most corrupt wars in recent memory? I'm going to skip the last two stories because they're fun stories and don't have time for it, but thank you for that. Okay, thank you, Big Gator Girl. All right, let's jump in and do questions and things. I will go till 7:15 or something tonight. We did a long Discord last night anyway, so I'll skip the Discord tonight and I'll hang later with you guys. So I'll go for the next half hour. We'll do questions so you guys get ample questions since the news went long. Remember, on TikTok, you can use the Q&A link in my profile to submit questions. The rest of you can obviously use boxes at the bottom. Feel free, of course, to use Super Chat and Super Sticker. Feel free to use the gifts on TikTok to keep supporting me. Oh, I do have a store as well. I always forget to mention my store. I have a store of really cool Ukrainian-themed T-shirts. Some really cool stuff, including a lot of designs that were drawn by Ukrainian kids, drawing designs about the war. And the parents gave us the designs and said we could sell them, and we're channeling some of that money back into Ukraine. In any case, let me go to my, one moment here, glasses. Beep, 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 beep. TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. Oops, I'm looking at a really nice chocolate cake recipe I saw at TikTok earlier today. I keep seeing these recipes. It's a recipe from 1900 for chocolate cake, and you're going, that's either going to be really good or it's going to be really gross, but who knows? Any news on why only 16 of the 32 missiles fired today were shot down? I don't know. I saw that and I was kind of divided because, okay, typically the Ukrainians seem to shoot down 80% of the Russian missiles or more. that would be 50%. So I'm not sure. I don't know. And mind you, maybe we don't know yet because we don't have any information yet as to what were the missiles that were fired. Were they using some kind of newer missiles that they've got, like the hypersonic ones or whatever, that they don't have that many, but if they use them, they're very hard to shoot down? I don't know, but I was wondering about that too. Yeah, I mean, it's time Ukraine attacks over the border. They cannot hold out forever. I think what Tony Moonhawk is saying is that Ukraine has been very careful not to attack Russia in Russia very much. They've done some things. Remember, they've used the drones. Thank you, Jetta, for that. They've used the drones. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. So, and they've used the drones and they've gone and attacked some Russian air bases, things like that. Really freaked the Russians out. But and they've done some. This is all Russia here. They've attacked Belgorod, which is right across the border here. Thanks, Cliff. I'll get to yours. Actually, I'm going to put a quick thing saving your question there. I'll get to it in a sec. Belgorod, right across the Ukrainian border by 15, 20 miles across the border. I mean, it's right here. And that's a key supply point for Russian logistics for, weapons, ammunition, fuel, stuff like that, coming to the Russian troops in eastern Ukraine. And the Ukrainians, certainly towards the beginning of the war especially, they were blowing up facilities. They blew up an oil storage facility. That was the reason the Russians got pissed off and blew up the Ukrainian oil facility in Lviv in Western Ukraine, because the Ukrainians blew one up in Russia. They blew up weapons storage in Belgorod. Thank you, Robert Lay. They blew up a bridge for a train that would have been used to supply the troops in Russia. But, the Americans and the Europeans have been very worried about making Vladimir Putin angry, because we don't want to make Putin angry because he'd cry. And have been basically, thank you, Robert, for that, have been basically, I love this. It's so cool because all day long, I don't know if you can hear, pretty much a guarantee that that's the president's helicopter, although he's probably not in it. But the flight path, I'm 2 miles north of the White House, and the flight path for the president's helicopter goes right over my apartment. And it's fun because all day long, and you can tell because they're heavier helicopters, but it's never him unless it's 3 helicopters. 3 helicopters, pretty much a guarantee it's him. This is just the one, but the one comes by every hour, and it's still kind of cool. I've got videos of it. Some other time I'll show you guys. In any case, we were talking about Belgorod and Russia, Ukraine attacking. So the Americans and others are not thrilled about Ukraine attacking inside Russia. They're afraid that Russia will get mad and Russia will use nukes, and especially if Ukraine uses Western weapons to attack within Russia, because then Russia would say that the West is attacking Russia. Now, I, again, don't see why that matters, because here's the deal. You can find all my links in my profile. Just go to my profile on TikTok, click the Linktree link, and you'll see them all there. Thank you for asking. The same reasons Putin isn't going to launch nuclear weapons in general is the same reasons he's not going to do it if Ukraine is attacking more inside Russia. If Putin's in danger of losing Moscow, yes, he's going to use nukes, right? But he's not going to use nukes because Ukraine is attacking towns and villages near Russia. It doesn't. The reason is because then the U.S. gets involved. He uses nuclear weapons, then we get involved, and then it becomes World War III. There's no logical reason why Putin would do this, and it drives me bonkers. And mind you, not only have we held Ukraine's hands back again, not only have we held Ukraine's hands back by not letting them attack inside Russia, by telling them you better not, but we've held back the weapons we're giving them. My dog is playing now. The toy I got her a couple days ago. We're not giving them longer range missiles that they need, especially the missiles. We're not giving them the missiles because we're afraid if we give them missiles that can go 200 miles or 300 kilometers, thank you, Denonce, then the Ukrainians might use them to attack inside Russia. And it's well, we already give them missiles that go 60 miles or 100 kilometers. They're not using those to shoot inside Russia. So what's the difference, right? What if they're not using? Again, this is Ukraine. This is Ukraine's border. All of this border is a border with Russia. All Ukraine has to do is pick up a stone and they could throw within Russian territory. Any of their bullets could go in within Russian territory. Any grenade, anything, a tank, an artillery shell, any of their stuff from us could easily go in Russian territory. They don't need, and they've got 50-mile weapons now. Okay, 100-kilometer. We're about to give them 100-mile long weapons with a range of 100 miles. Thank you for the confetti, Nathan. That can go 100 miles, 94 miles actually, or 150 kilometers. And that will go even farther within Russia. Why can we give them that, but we can't give them weapons that go 200 miles? This is the incrementalism that we are doing from the beginning of the war. These are the attackums I'm talking about. Exactly. The only thing is, I don't think so, Dark Chef. Dark Chef is saying, if we give them attackums, which are the missiles that can go 200 miles or 300 kilometers, that the concern is if we give them those, they're going to hit Moscow. Now, why though? Why? I don't think they will. First of all, we're never giving them anything again if they do that. Ukraine survives. Thank you, Arabella. The only reason not the only reason, I'll rephrase that. Without Western support, Ukraine, I don't think would exist right now. I don't want to say the only reason, right? Because obviously the Ukrainians kind of had a big hand in this, right? We had a lot of Western support in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it didn't do jack, especially in Afghanistan. Boy, did we support Afghanistan a hell of a lot more than Ukraine, and Afghanistan's like gone. So it's not just Western support, but without the Western support, I think Ukraine would be toast right now. Ukraine knows that. They can't afford to lose our support. Thank you, by my rules. They can't afford to lose our support, and they know it. So I just don't think they're going to go attacking Moscow. All right. The dog is begging for water. I'm going to see if she goes a little bit longer. Hang on here. Thank you, Cliff, for that. Okay, good. She quit. Oh, you want your blankie? All right. My dog is my child here. All right. Cliff Wolf. Thank you for that, Cliff. Milley, who is General Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's the top American military officer. Milley demands Ukraine mount layered attack, i.e., thank you, Grayson, i.e., infantry, tanks, air cover. Where's the F-16s, Apaches, Helos? Okay, I think what Cliff is getting at here, because again, it sounds like Cliff is, I always say, I'm a foreign policy expert. I'm not a defense expert, but obviously you kind of have to learn this stuff for the wars. What he's saying is similar, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Cliff, to what we've been saying about the combined arms issue of the Russians not understanding very well, especially because their troops are so poorly trained, that you don't just attack with tanks. You attack with tanks, with artillery, with men on the ground, with planes. And then even when you attack with planes, you attack with A-10 Warthogs, which are these planes that come low and slow and can blow up tanks and things. But then they're so low and slow that you need other planes to defend the Warthogs, right? It's a whole combined effort. And what I think Cliff is saying here is that General Milley, the top American general, is demanding that Ukraine mount a layered attack. In other words, infantry, tanks, air cover, right? So he's saying men on the ground, tanks, planes coming in, that they've got to do coordinated, but we're not actually giving them the planes they need to do the air attacks. Thank you. No, I'm with you. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. And what's really annoys me with that too is, and this is where I think, unfortunately, our government's been lying a little bit, and I don't like it. I think this is sort of one of the problems of knowing things. Meaning like I know politics. I've been doing this for 30 years and I know stuff. And when you can tell the government's misleading you, even if it's for a good reason, it really pisses me off. I don't like being misled. And the Biden administration is claiming that there's this whole issue of F-16s. We can't give them F-16s. They're really hard to learn and all this kind of garbage, right? Thank you, Sheena, for that. Then why didn't we give them the MiG-29s a year ago? Remember, it probably was as early as, it could have been last March, April at the latest, that story came out. Poland looking to give, God, was it 100 or something, MiG-29s or something to Ukraine? Thank you, Jason. MiG-29s are old Soviet fighters, very good Soviet fighters that Eastern Europe has a lot of, and the Ukrainians have a lot of, because they were all part of the Soviet Empire. And therefore, they had a lot of Soviet weapons. Therefore, the Ukrainians already know how to fly and operate them because they're the very planes the Ukrainians use. The Poles wanted to give so much more to this, so much more to the Ukrainians, and we said no, and the Germans said no. Why? Right? If the issue is F-16s, then why didn't we give MiG-29s a year ago when we could? The issue isn't F-16s. It's the same BS of Vladimir Putin. I'm telling you, from my tastes, the entire thing boils down to Vladimir Putin will get angry, and we don't want to make Vladimir Putin angry, because if he gets angry, it's like the Hulk. You don't want to see me angry. Give me a break. What about us getting angry? And I mean that sincerely. Thank you, Bonnie. We're playing at this like he's the only nuclear power, but I'm quite serious here. Part of being the world's, first of all, we are the world's superpower at this point. Thank you by my rules. I'm not convinced there are any other ones. Russia, Russia's, I saw a description months ago that I thought was kind of good. Russia is a nuclear superpower, military second rate, economy third rate, right? Cultural as well. I'd say third rate now. Good books going back 100 years ago, but not anymore. And America first rate, is world superpower, and China getting there as far as world superpower. We're acting like Russia's the big superpower and we're the poor guy, and we're the weak guy. And being the strong guy doesn't necessarily mean Madeleine Albright, who I liked a lot. She was a former Clinton Secretary of State and was one of my professors at Georgetown and was advising me. Very nice woman. Nice woman. I think people who worked for her felt she wasn't very nice, but as my professor at Georgetown, she was very nice. And we called her Madeleine. Madeleine got into trouble once because I think it was dealing with Kosovo. And coming up to that in the late 90s, Serbs were committing basically ethnic cleansing against the Kosovars, who are Muslims. The Serbs are Christians. And Madeleine, I think this was the issue. Madeleine says to Colin Powell, because he was like, I don't think militarily, meh, meh, meh. And she goes, what is the point of that military of yours that we're spending so much money on if you're too afraid to use it? And he got pissed. Now, part of the reason he got pissed was you don't go to war simply because you have a military. Think about it, right? The idea of buying this military we have isn't to use it. It's so that we don't have to use it in many cases. In some cases, obviously, it's so that we use it. It's not like Al-Qaeda it's not like terrorists aren't going to do what they do because the U.S. has weapons. But a lot of it with the Russians and everything else was peace through strength, to use the old Reagan terms and everything else. It's deterrence. They look at the weapons you have. Well, if we've got these weapons and we basically, I'm not saying we use them, but we make it clear we can and will use them if necessary, then it makes the Russians have the same discussion we're all having going, right? I want to see Vladimir Putin go, I don't want to make Joe Biden angry. I don't want to make Macron. He's got nukes too, by the way, in France, and Richie Sunak in the UK. They've all got nuclear weapons too. Why don't we put Vladimir Putin in a situation where he's got to say, I don't want to make those guys angry because they've got nukes. Thank you, Wanda. Oh, whale wave. Thank you for that. And again, it is a much more nuanced discussion than just doing an hour on TikTok and YouTube here. I get that. It's not, hey, we've got the weapons, let's threaten nuclear war. That's not what it is. But I think we aren't acting like a superpower. We are acting like a lesser power. And Russia senses it, and Putin is getting away with murder as a result. And we're seeing it in terms of the weapons we're giving and everything else. I will never run for president. Are you kidding me? The thing is, I love working for elected officials. I don't want to be an elected official, like two totally different things, Anyway, thanks again for that, Cliff. Brave Cobra asks on Twitch, if you collect all the boxes of the Russian airplane parts, is there an IKEA plan to reassemble the pieces into your own personal jet fighter? That would be really funny, actually. That would be okay. Wendy, when you got time. No, we've got a kid, Wendy, who's a wonderful artist, who's been a graphic designer, who's designed a lot of our shirts that actually are in our store. what is it? store.aravosis.com. But yeah, an IKEA plan to put the Russian fighter jets apart back. I mean, nobody's putting Humpty and Dumpty back together again. These guys are, I think that plane has seen better days, but still very cool. No, I kind of wish I bought more boxes now because, well, the problem is that we're auctioning them on the Discord, but the boxes were $200 each. And basically you pay to the charity. And as a thank you, the charity gives you the box of the Russian fighter jet parts that were shot down over Ukraine. But because they were $200, I didn't want to buy that many. Oh, we know how much the jet was worth. I think it's 50 million. It's in the description I've got on the Discord. I think it's 50 million. But I didn't want to buy too many boxes because they were $200 each. And I'm thinking, what if people don't like these things? Because also when it's $200 each, it means we've got to start auctioning them at $200. And I'm thinking, I love this stuff. I think it's totally cool. But I'm thinking I may be the only geek who thinks boxes of Russian fighter jet parts that were shot down over Ukraine are cool. I think it's pretty cool. But in any case, people do like them. So now I kind of wish we got more boxes. Oh, well, what do you do? What do you do? All right. A few more questions, guys. We've got time. I started the Q&A a little bit. Excuse me. Yeah, Irina, not going to happen. I will go to Ukraine some point. You can join me there. What else we got question-wise here? So I'm looking on TikTok as YouTube as well, because you guys are often chatting amongst yourselves. So I missed some of the questions you're posing for me. So let me know if you have questions for me. Well, there's a good question. Kelly is asking what did, thank you, Robert, for that. What did Poland ultimately do with their MiG-29s? Here's the thing we don't know. There definitely, something good did happen in part, we think. I had read that Poland, and this would be amazing if they did this, that Poland prepared because thank you, Harold, because everyone was afraid to give Ukraine the MiG fighter jets that Poland had. This is now maybe 8 months ago or something, 9 months ago, that the Poles turned around and said, fine, then we will send you spare parts for the planes you have. That clearly is okay. That's clearly okay. And what the, hang on, I'm looking here. I can pull up Twitch, but I can't pull up like questions individually. So I'm looking here. Otan Bot had a question. Oh, here we go. Okay, I see it, Otan Bot. I'll pull yours up next. There was a report recently that the Poles said, yeah, we'll supply spare parts for MiGs to the Ukrainians. Clearly that's okay, because then we're not increasing the number of planes. We're simply giving them parts to keep using the planes they have, right? Well, in retrospect, I saw one report. I don't know if it's true. I saw one report that the Poles, in fact, broke down a number of big fighter jets into parts IKEA style and shipped the parts to the Ukrainians and claimed these are spare parts. They were actually entire MiG fighting jets and the Ukrainians reassembled them. Now, if that's true, it's brilliant. I hope it's true. So who knows? Who knows? And I will say this, I am hoping that some of our frustration with our governments in terms of support for Ukraine is because they're lying. Like, I hope, for example, the tanks are coming sooner. I'm hoping that the MiG fighter jets did come sooner, that the planes are coming sooner, that basically they're telling us all of this, oh, we're afraid of Russia, because they want Russia to think the weapons aren't there. And if Russia thinks the weapons aren't there, Russia's going to do something stupid, right? They're going to put their planes in the air, not realizing Ukraine has got amazing weapons to shoot them down, right? So that's my hope. I will say I'm not convinced. My bigger concern is that I think, Occam's razor here, or Spock would say the same. Well, no, in Spock's case, it's the opposite. But, the Occam's razor, which is basically the simplest explanation is, I'm going to give a bad definition, but the simplest explanation, maybe it's the simplest plausible explanation, is usually what is happening. In medical terms, they say something like, don't look for zebras. And the idea is, if it looks like a horse, don't assume it's a zebra. It's probably a horse. And sort of the same thing here, that it's happening so much and in so many ways that I do get the sense that our governments actually are afraid of the Russians and it's holding us back. I hope It's actually a zebra, and it means we've been given lots of things to the Ukrainians that nobody knows about. I hope it's true. Oops, hitting my things in my pocket as we're talking. What else we got here? What else we got? Boom. Sorry, looking more Q&A in my TikTok here. Why can't we give Ukraine the technology to create their own bombs? Well, I mean, it may not even be the technology. I mean, they need the materials, and where are they going to do it without the Russians just bombing it, right? Without the Russians blowing it up. Also, depending what it is, our better bombs, I mean, our better bombs, you know, we don't necessarily want to be sharing that technology, right? That's a big deal. I do know that a recent deal was worked out with Ukraine and an unnamed Central European country to jointly produce artillery shells. Now, I don't know how many and I don't know how quickly, but that's an example of a good thing, of this sort of what you're just saying, which is basically helping the Ukrainians maybe produce some of their own. But I don't know what that means. There was also talk of the Turks setting up like a Bayraktar factory, which is the really cool drone the Ukrainians were using at the beginning, and setting up a Bayraktar factory in Ukraine. The problem is, I had the same concerns about that. How do you set it up in Ukraine in a way that the Russians don't blow it up? Like, I just don't know how you do that. I don't know. But I'm suspecting there's a way, or they wouldn't suggest it because it seems kind of obvious, you know? Yeah, I don't. Yeah. I don't disagree with you. Jojo saying I support Ukraine. I just wish there was more I could do for them and all the others that are going through these disasters all over the world. I agree. And the fact that we have people suffering right now around the world that could use help, heat, food, shelter, the basic things in life, including being treated as human beings. Yeah, I mean, all I can say is that stuff has always happened and will always happen. And you got to keep trying. Oh, Otanbot, you're right. I forgot. You've got to keep trying to help. I'm not saying like, oh, well, but I maybe because I've been working on this stuff for 30 years, there's always crises. There's always wars. There's always famines. And you do what you can. I mean, in my case, I devote myself to different causes. I devote myself to civil rights causes that pissed me off. I devoted myself to the Ukraine one because it really pissed me off with what the Russians were doing. So I decided I'm going to do this full time. I think that's sort of all you can do as a person is maybe, thank you, Harold, maybe try to find a way that you can get involved in one big issue you care about. Doesn't have to be Ukraine. I mean, you're right. It could be poverty in Africa, or, you know, famine in Africa. I don't even know, some development work, and see if there's just, I don't know how, but see if there's some way you can get involved yourself. Because at least for me, as much as, thank you, who was that? A big Gator girl. As much as I find these kind of topics very stressful, and I think like it's hard to know, you know, you're constantly worrying. A word I learned, I don't speak German, but I learned a word in German years ago that I think applies for this, Weltschmerz. And it means like pain for the world, I think. At least the way I understood the word when I Googled it was sort of this feeling of pain for things happening around the world or whatever. And I think that's very typical of people who want to get involved to make a difference. And I think that's typical of you yourself in terms of what you're saying there, right? That you want to, you know, you feel bad for everything else going on, and you have to be careful it doesn't burn you out, right? That you're focusing on war all of you guys, right? Just watching the war, that you're not burned out because of all the bad news every day, but rather it inspires you because you feel like you're able to do so. In my case, I'm hoping it keeps me going because I feel like I'm able to do something, and that makes me feel better. Thank you, Jake, for the gift there as well. All right, Otanbot, sorry, missed you there. Should we worry about the lessons learned that Russia gains from this war? Sure, in principle. I mean, you know, the Otanbot was saying, should we worry about let me pull it up again. The lessons Russia learns. I mean, if Russia has the capacity to learn, it's not clear they do. And what I mean is, logistics has always been a problem for Russia, and they apparently haven't figured it out yet. and logistics, meaning, you've got long lines of troops. Actually, again, think about Ukraine, right? Russia's occupying all of this territory. This is not Russia. This is Ukraine. Russia's got troops here. These troops are fighting. These troops that are, 100 miles or however 50, 75 miles into Ukraine, who's feeding them, right? Down here in Kherson alone, at least a couple months ago, Russia had like 70,000 troops. These 70,000 troops need 3 meals a day. That's 200,000 meals a day for these troops. Where are they getting them from, right? So that's an issue. Where are they getting their weapons from? They're fighting, right? Thank you, Cheryl. They're fighting every day. They need new ammunition every day. They need new fuel for their tanks and their vehicles every day. That's logistics. It's how you keep supplying your military as time goes on. The Russians suck at it, and they haven't seemed to learn their lessons. From what we're hearing now, with some of what we're hearing, right? And at the beginning of the show, I talked about this a lot. The American, British, and Ukrainian experts are saying that it doesn't look like the Russians have learned their lessons yet, and that therefore this new offensive with hundreds of thousands of new Russian troops may not be very effective because it's the Russians doing the same bad war fighting, doing it again, right? So, I mean, now I will say one thing. What is underlying your question is the Ukrainians. There's been a lot of talk of how Ukraine, best country in Europe and maybe best country in the world right now in terms of experts at modern war fighting, right? Because look at them, right? They've had to figure out how to fight a modern war using, the internet, using drones, using all this kind of stuff, and against a bigger adversary. And they've clearly done it effectively, which means they've learned as they've gone along. So the danger is the Russians learning as they've gone along as well. And it looks like, knock on wood, maybe the Russians haven't learned. Now, there were some things they learned. I was reading, I don't remember the details, but some of the work the Russians were doing in the East, they were being smarter about. I don't remember what it was now, but I remember reading, they were going more slowly. They were being more careful so that they weren't losing as many troops as they were before. So there you go. IKEA war story. I don't know what IKEA war story. Let the mods know. Let Aravosis know, mod, please. I looked up IKEA war story. Okay, I'm not sure what the war story is though from IKEA. Interesting though. The U.S. is sending M1A2 Abrams to Ukraine, but they may not make it there for 6 months to a year. So, good weapons, may not be heading there for a while. Was it Czech copies? Our resident Czech here is saying that the unknown country working together with Ukraine to manufacture ammunition is the Czech Republic, with exchange of experienced workers between companies after war to easy transitions. Okay, I was wondering, it certainly wasn't Hungary. I was wondering about that. Yeah. Suspense is saying, and thank you for that, Suspense, CNN says Russia is massing aviation assets in Belarus. Okay, that's interesting. What we've heard was, we didn't hear where they were being massed. We simply heard that Russia, in the last couple of days, we've been hearing a lot about Russia massing aviation on the Ukrainian border. The thing is, the experts keep saying that they don't, this is including US military, they don't think a Russian air attack is imminent, and they're not really convinced it's going to make that much of a difference, because the problem the Russians have is they have not established like air dominance or air supremacy over Ukraine, whichever one it is, meaning you've got to go around and blow up all the Ukrainian planes, and especially the Ukrainian radar and the Ukrainian air defenses. So all those surface to air missiles and things like that, you've got to blow them up so that your planes can fly with impunity, right? What the US did in both Iraq wars. You got to blow up everything on the ground so your planes don't get shot out of the sky. Hey, no. She's wanting to play with the puppy again. So what the situation the Russians are in is they can use their planes to defend their own territory that they hold in Ukraine, but they can't use it to attack Ukrainian territory because they get blown out of the sky. So all of these planes, these Russian planes in Belarus, same old puppy being annoying. 13-year-old puppy. the Russians are in the same position. As soon as they leave Belarus to come into Ukraine, they're going to get shot down in principle. So I don't know. I mean, knowing the Russians too, it could all be part of a. Well, here's the thing. Actually, here's the thing. One thing. Oh, good. Oh, thanks, John Hill. I'm pretty glad to hear that. One thing the Russians have always been doing, we think, with Belarus is doing a psych, doing a bluff. The idea here, maybe I'll wrap up with this. The idea here is Russia is all over here, okay? Belarus over here. Russia's used Belarus to move military troops through to invade Ukraine at the beginning of the war. And now there's been ongoing talk of Russia using Belarus to attack Ukraine again, maybe even Belarusian troops. If Russia's putting planes here, mind you, actually think about this. We just heard earlier in my show from the American experts, U.S. military experts saying that, Pentagon experts saying that I'm trying to think of this. They do not believe Russia has a lot of planes left, and they don't think Russia's going to use their planes because their planes are going to get shot out of the sky. If you're the Russians and you want to, up your advantage, maybe you take some of those planes you're not going to use anyway, and you move them into Belarus. What does that do? That requires Ukraine to move some of the anti-aircraft weapons that it's got down here where the fighting is really happening. It makes Ukraine move some of those anti-aircraft weapons over here, just in case the Russian Air Force attacks from Belarus. They're basically wasting Ukrainian assets. These are Ukrainian assets that would have been over here, stopping whatever Russian air flights there are. I think it maybe is a bluff just to waste the Ukrainian air defenses. That's my guess, but who knows? All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up. Let me do a quick recap of the news that we covered tonight. Otherwise, tomorrow we'll be back again, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. Today is Thursday. That means Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, I will do my usual coffee talk on TikTok, which basically is, thank you, Denons, for there, is basically a private get-together for the paid TikTok subscribers. It's just something TikTok lets you do because I'm trying to make this work financially, doing this full time, and we're not quite there yet. We're getting there though. It's getting much better. I'm also trying to do it with TikTok. So people on TikTok who are the paid subscribers, where it says SNN next to your name, you will be allowed into the chat room Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, US. That's New York City time, Washington D.C. time, and we hang out for half an hour, and just shoot the breeze. We talk Ukraine, but we talk about it's a nice hangout. So put in your calendar if you are a paid TikTok subscriber to join us. All right. Quick recap of the news. Israel's foreign minister arrived in Kiev for an official visit. Putin, Institute for the Study of War, says Putin is unlikely to announce major new Russian mobilization initiatives in his big address on February 21st. Sky News military analyst Sean Bell. I did a lot of talk on him talking about the upcoming Russian offensive. His main point was that Russian troops and their military has been severely damaged and their weapons have been severely damaged. So it's not entirely clear that the Russians are going to be able to do very well in their offensive. CNN then talked to U.S., UK, thank you, Alan, U.S., UK, and Ukrainian experts who also said that, and this is the best quote, that the Russian offensive this spring is likely more aspirational than realistic. Russia, big drama. Thank you. We've got another whale. We'll do the wave. Thank you, guys. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the British Ministry of Defense, talking about Russian air power, is saying they just don't think Russian air power is going to make a big difference in the upcoming battles, mostly because the Ukrainians have them caught. They can't, they just can't. Yeah, thanks, mods. I was trying to read what that person was about. I love people who get upset when I say if you could support my work by paying me, who basically who don't work for free. Nobody out there works for free. This is my job. I got to pay the bills. I don't get money from other people. I get money from you folks. That's why I bug you. So and you come through for me again and again. So thank you. But I just like to remind people, because I think some people just don't get it. Like, how do you think I pay my electricity bill? Like, I'm doing this. So anyway, per Sky News, President Zelensky has dismissed suggestions that Ukraine would agree to Russia retaining control over any of Ukraine's territory as part of a peace deal. A new European Union poll reveals that 61% of EU citizens believe the war will end in Ukraine's favor. German Moldovan lawmakers have voted in favor of a new government led by a pro-Western economist. Via Max Sedon at the Financial Times, 2 days after the U.S. published a report claiming Russia has abducted at least 6,000 Ukrainian children, a Russian human rights or children's rights commissioner appeared on TV with Putin bragging about the Ukrainian child she adopted, which is a war crime. And then I had two other funny stories. A video posted by the BBC's Francis Scar shows hundreds of Russians gathering in the far eastern city of Blagoveshchensk, I'm going to say, with buckets of cold water, with which they then pour over themselves to demonstrate their strength in a strange show of support for the invasion. It was 9 degrees below zero there today. Russia has moved closer to producing its own stock of Viagra after U.S. pharmaceutical companies have told them that we're not going to give them the supplies to make their own. And I just thought that was kind of funny. It's like, oh, well, what do you do? All right, guys, have a good night. I'm going to skip Discord tonight. As I said, I did a good hour plus on Discord last night. I want to take a break and get some food right now. But thank you for joining. Thank you for all the gifts on TikTok. Thank you for the gifts on YouTube. Just thanks for joining us in general. I appreciate it, guys. As always, we will be here Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern time, U.S. If you enjoyed the show, set your calendar for tomorrow, Friday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time, U.S. Thank you, Luis, for that. And join us. We'll be back on TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, etc. All the same services, okay? Oh. There's a super chat from something I did not see. Hang on. 1 second. All the paid super chats we always get to. Hang on. What did I miss here? Alan, but it's something, and then Roshan's writing something in whatchamacallit, your language. Hang on. I'm looking here. Although if it's in the same language. Oh, Alan Tracy. Yeah, he thanked me. I already said thank you to Alan. Yeah, I thanked Alan. I did thank Alan. I just couldn't click because we had another question up, but I did thank Alan. Yep. He didn't have a question too, though, did he? Oh, he did mean to have a question. I understand. I thought Alan was just doing a super sticker. Sorry, Alan had a question as well. Last question. Do you think the buildup of aircraft could be a trap? Get Ukraine to attack Belarus and then join the war? That too, potentially. I mean, the question is whether Lukashenko, the Belarusian dictator, even wants to enter the war, because a lot of people don't think he does. I mean, Putin's putting pressure on him to enter the war, but Lukashenko's a dictator and he needs his military at home holding up his own government, first of all. B, he doesn't want his military to get destroyed by the Ukrainians, or maybe the Poles enter as well and destroy, because then he's going to lose his hold on power. So A, he needs the military at home, and B, he needs his military to stay strong at home, both of which he jeopardizes if he goes to war in Ukraine. So I doubt Lukashenko himself is just itching to go fight in Ukraine. Putin, by the way, Putin could have ordered him to, because Putin saved his butt a few years ago. Maybe Putin ordered him, said, we're moving planes in there. And part of Putin's idea that he's not saying is maybe the Ukrainians will attack preemptively. Because think about it too. A lot of Russian planes sitting on airfields all together looking like tempting targets could be too hard for Ukraine not to attack. So who knows? That's a possibility. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to go get some food. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I will see you tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern. All right. Yep, exactly. Lukashenko had said today that he's not joining the war unless Ukraine attacks, but Ukraine could attack if they see a ton of Russian aircraft sitting next to each other in an airfield as a nice, juicy target. That's interesting. Interesting idea. All right. I'm going to sign off for you guys. Thank you. And same with you.